very good morning to all News 9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. We continue to get you the latest from war zone Israel. Now today marks day 26 since Israel suffered potentially the worst attack in its brief history as a nation. Here's the latest update from the war front. 9 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza. That's what the IDF has stated. For all the viewers who have just joined in, we are getting you the latest from the 26th day since Israel suffered potentially the worst attack in its brief history as a nation. Now we're getting you the latest from war zone Israel. 9 soldiers have been killed in Gaza, and Israeli airstrikes there have killed dozens in Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Saudi Arabia has condemned in strongest terms bombing of Jabalia camp. Israel has accepted the attack and it has stated that the target was high-ranking Hamas commander, which it was able to kill. Made gains in ongoing ground invasion in Gaza. That's what the Israeli authorities have stated. Now, at least 8,525 Palestinians, including 3,542 children, have been killed. Right on your screens, it was on October 7, when Hamas launched a deadly attack against southern Israel. And now on the 1st of November, the death toll, the Palestinian death toll stands at 8,525. Meanwhile, Houthis have launched ballistic missiles and drones towards Israel. Jabalia camp bombing has also sparked outrage in the Arab world. Nine Israeli soldiers have died while fighting against Hamas terrorists in northern Gaza. That's in fact an announcement that was made by the Israeli Defense Forces. The soldiers have been identified as Lieutenant Ariel Reach, who's 24 years old, from Jerusalem. Corporal Asif Lugar, 21 years old, from Yagur. Sergeant Adi Danan from Yavne. Staff Sergeant Halil Solomon, 20 years old, from Dimona. Staff Sergeant Eris, 20 years old, from Oronit. Staff Sergeant Adi Leon, 20 years old, from Nili. Corporal Adio Ovadia, 19 years old, from Tel Aviv. Corporal Leon, 19 years old, from Herzliya, and Staff Sergeant Roy Davai, 20 years old, from Jerusalem. Now the IDF has added 2 other infantry soldiers have suffered serious injuries yesterday in Gaza. Israel has intensified its operations in North Gaza, and meanwhile this is the latest that the IDF has shared with all the people. The IDF spokesperson's announcement regarding the names of 9 additional IDF martyrs whose families were notified. That's what in fact the Israeli Defense Forces Twitter account has stated. It stated that during the fighting in the last day, 2 fighters from the 77th Battalion, a fighter from the Sabar Battalion and a fighter from Rotem Battalion were seriously injured. Their families have been notified. 9 Israeli soldiers have died while fighting against Hamas terrorists in northern Gaza. That's where the Israeli forces have also intensified its operations. The soldiers have been identified as Lieutenant Ariel Reach, 24 years old, from Jerusalem. Corporal Asif Lugar, 21 years old, from Yagur. Sergeant Adi Danan from Yavne. Staff Sergeant Halil Solomon, 20 years old, from Dimona. Staff Sergeant Eris, 20 years old, from Oronit. Staff Sergeant Adi Leon, 20 years old, from Nili. Corporal Adio Ovadia, 19 years old, from Tel Aviv. Corporal Leon, 19 years old, from Herzliya, and Staff Sergeant Roy Davai, 20 years old, from Jerusalem. 2 other soldiers, infantry soldiers, have suffered grievous injuries yesterday in Gaza. The Israeli army released a new video on Tuesday, which they claim shows soldiers in the Gaza Strip. Now, according to a statement from the Israeli army, their ground troops targeted Hamas outposts in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. This operation aimed at striking anti-tank missile launching cells and posts. Israel is focusing on the tunnels beneath the densely populated Gaza enclave as a key objective during its ongoing ground offensive. This offensive was launched in retaliation for a surprise attack by the Islamist group Hamas into southern Israel on the 7th of October, following 3 weeks of aerial bombardment. Right on your screens, that's the video released by the Israeli army, which shows soldiers in the Gaza Strip. That's what the Israeli army has claimed. Now, according to the statement, their ground troops have targeted Hamas outposts in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where Israel has intensified its operations. Do remember that this operation is aimed at striking anti-tank missile launching cells and posts. It was on the 7th of October when Hamas carried out a dastardly attack against southern Israel, killing 1,400 people and taking about 212 people as hostages. Israel has vowed to retaliate and eradicate Hamas. In that context, it has been intensifying its operations in North Gaza, and now it has released a new video which they claim shows soldiers in the Gaza Strip. That's right on your screens. In fact, the video that was shared by the Israeli army. The Israeli forces are currently inside the Gaza Strip. There has been a continuous aerial bombardment from the Israeli side in the last 3 weeks. And now it has intensified its operations in the Gaza Strip, as it is also now moving closer towards a ground invasion, complete ground invasion of the of the Gaza Strip. Now, this operation was aimed at striking anti-tank missile launching cells and posts. Israel is focusing on the tunnels beneath the densely populated Gaza enclave as a key objective during its ongoing ground offensive. Today marks day 26 since Israel suffered the worst attack in its history as a nation, and Israel in fact has vowed to retaliate, and in a manner that coming generations will remember. Now, that's the fresh video released by the Israeli army on Tuesday, which shows soldiers in the Gaza Strip. The fight in Gaza is bearing similarities to operations in Iraq, where US-backed Iraqi forces flushed Islamic State fighters out of a tunnel network in 2014. But in Gaza, Israeli forces face more formidable infrastructure and more challenging geography. Hamas's tunnel system is more advanced and its fighters are better trained, more disciplined and better equipped. The IDF soldiers have to literally go through the maze of tunnels and literally clear one after the other. The tunnels could also turn out to be an operational trap.
Try to figure it out. All right. I'll close that one.
You're watching right on your screens. The IDF has struck 300 targets in Gaza. The IDF is clear in its intention. It will eradicate Hamas. For it carried out an uncalled for attack against Israel, against southern Israel on the 7th of October. 3 weeks into the war, IDF has been carrying out intense operations in northern Gaza. And the ground, in fact, operations have only intensified. Israeli forces, in fact, are entering the strip from two directions in a presumed effort to divide it into two.
Gaza is Hamas's power base, and the huge tunnel network underneath Gaza is a secret power base within that base. It is Hamas's default go-to place to hide, to conceal hostages, to fire rockets from, to store weapons. So that is why the network is so important to Israel. First of all, it has destroyed a lot of the ground cover above land so that the Hamas fighters do not have anywhere to go if they run. Now, the Israeli troops are moving underground in order to free the hostages, kill or capture the Hamas fighters, and deter or stop them from ever doing this sort of thing again. I've been down some of these tunnels in Gaza. The smaller commercial ones are about 3 to 4 feet wide. The military tunnels are much more sophisticated, concrete reinforced, far deeper. It's going to be very, very, very hard for Israel to flush Hamas fighters out of that network. Hamas launching an attack on October 7th into Israeli kibbutzes and towns was unprecedented. It has shocked and galvanized Israel into a retaliation far bigger than anything we've ever seen before. Many of Gaza's 2.3 million population are now without homes, so there is a humanitarian crisis brewing in Gaza, but Israel is determined not to let material into Gaza that Hamas could use to redouble its assault and attacks on Israeli forces.
Now, Israeli forces supported by armored vehicles were observed operating in southern Israel. This happened 4 days after the commencement of a significant ground offensive in the Gaza Strip. Israel reported that its forces engaged with the Hamas gunmen within the extensive tunnel network beneath Gaza. They aimed to free hostages and advance their campaign to eliminate the terrorist group. Israeli forces targeted Gaza's main north-south road and launched attacks on Gaza City from two different directions. Missiles were observed falling onto Gaza, accompanied by explosions and occasional gunfire. The United States and other countries have stated that they are exploring options for the future of the Strip. There doesn't seem to be a clear and obvious endgame in sight. Israeli tanks have been active in Gaza for at least 4 days, following weeks of aerial bombardment. Missiles continue to hit Gaza even as tensions escalate. Now, there in the latest, missiles were observed falling onto Gaza, accompanied by explosions and occasional gunfire. The United States, along with other countries, are exploring options for the future of the Strip. There obviously does not seem to be a clear and an end game in sight. The Israeli tanks have been active in Gaza for at least 4 days, following weeks of aerial bombardments. On Tuesday, at least 3 rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. Israel reported that its forces engaged with Hamas gunmen within the extensive tunnel network beneath Gaza. Meanwhile, a hospital director in Gaza stated that over 50 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a refugee camp in Jabalia, with 150 more wounded. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected international calls to cease the fighting. There has been no immediate comment from the Israeli military regarding this incident. Netanyahu has rejected calls for ceasefire talks, and there Israel bombed the house of a top Hamas official in the West Bank during the Gaza war. But before that, on Tuesday, at least 3 rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. Israel reported that its forces engaged with Hamas gunmen within extensive tunnel beneath Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel bombed the house of a top Hamas official in the West Bank during the Gaza war. Saleh al-Arori, who is the Hamas's deputy leader, was not there at the time of attack. Israeli forces took over the house earlier, using it as an intelligence center. The attack was symbolic, targeting al-Arori, a key figure behind previous attacks on Israel. Additionally, the Israeli forces confirmed the killing of Nassim Abu Ajina on social media platform X, formerly Twitter. The Israel Defense Forces said that troops were engaged in fierce battles against Hamas terrorists deep in Gaza as soldiers and tanks pushed further into the strip amid the war against the terror group. The military said ground and air forces hit several Hamas positions and anti-tank guided missile squads. According to the IDF, troops have killed dozens of terrorists amid the fighting in urban areas and have also seized weapons. Fierce battle against Hamas terrorists underway in Gaza. Soldiers and tanks pushed further into the strip amid the war against the terror group. Street-to-street battle also witnessed in several areas. Now let's take a look at the concerns raised by a group lobbying for the families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. They insist that the safety of their loved ones must be a top priority for the Israeli government, especially as military operations in the Gaza Strip intensify. Take a look.
A group lobbying for the families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas say the safety of their loved ones needs to be a top priority for the government. Their concerns come as the Israeli military expands ground operations in the Gaza Strip.
Keep pushing.
Adva Adar believes her 85-year-old grandmother is in Gaza, based on photos and footage purporting to show her capture. Reuters could not independently verify the location or date of filming of videos showing hostages being kidnapped.
My grandmother doesn't have the time to wait. She needs to be back home now. She's ill and she needs medication and she needs medical care.
On Saturday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's goals in the war were to destroy Hamas's governing and military capabilities, as well as return the more than 200 hostages.
As her boyfriend, I truly afraid that these two goals is like in conflict with each other.
Noam Alon's girlfriend, Inbar Hyman, is one of the hostages.
I think that first, the hostages should be free.
Israel has tightened its blockade and bombarded Gaza since Hamas gunmen stormed across the border into Israel on October 7th, killing at least 1,400 people, as well as taking the hostages.
We are not political people or, military people. We are two simple people that try to save our sister.
Leah and Leonia Nye believe their sister Moran was taken hostage at the Nova Music Festival.
We found a clip from TikTok with begging for her life.
And they say time is of the essence.
If Moran is listening to us, Moran, we are united together. We love you so much.
Continue to be positive as you are, and think about the big hugs we're all going to give you when you come back. And I want you to know that we're doing everything we can to bring you back home as soon as possible.
Now, in Israel's long war on Hamas, IDF will likely need to engage in urban warfare in Gaza. Urban warfare has often proved to be bloody in nature. Military operations in urban terrain is the hardest type of warfare that any nation can ask its military to conduct. Casualties tend to be 3 to 6 times greater in city streets than open landscape. Let's take a look at the current situation in Gaza. Now, urban warfare in Gaza bloodier than in Iraq. Situation in Gaza is such that more than 8,000 people have been killed. Over 3,000 children have been killed. 1/10 of Gaza is destroyed. 280,000 have been rendered homeless. 0.3% of population is killed. Now, America and its allies, alongside Iraqi soldiers, conducted urban warfare in Mosul in Iraq in 2016-17 to weed out ISIS. It was a deadly exercise and incurred heavy loss of lives and destruction of property. Let's get you the battle for Mosul. Now, bitter urban warfare in the Iraqi town in 2016-17. 9,000 lives lost, almost 0.6% of the city's population, most residential buildings damaged, 9 lakh civilians fled the city. Gaza is a densely populated enclave and urban warfare in Gaza will be very challenging because of a number of reasons. Gaza's urban warfare problems right on your screens. Geography less permissive for escape, Egypt not opening its borders to refugees. Israel ordered Gazans to leave North Gaza before attack. Half of North Gaza's 1.1 million population did not leave. Israel is also striking parts of South Gaza. The urban warfare in Gaza is self-contained within the enclave. Gaza's healthcare system crippled due to attacks. Israel is also not keen on sending civilian aid to Gaza. Now, urban warfare in Gaza is likely to be bloodier and deadlier than the one in Mosul. Now, why Gaza can be bloodier than Mosul? Let's get you that detail too. ISIS held Mosul for only 2 years. Hamas is deeply embedded in Gaza. Hamas defenses built under civil infrastructures. Now, Israel's offensive in Gaza intensive with 6,000 bombs dropped in 1 week. US and allies dropped 7,000 bombs in Mosul over 2 months. IDF has little affinity with Palestinian civilians in Gaza. The liberation forces in Iraq wanted to free co-patriots from ISIS. Mosul hospitals were struck after long periods of warnings. Israel is striking hospitals in Gaza that Hamas uses as a base. In Mosul, civilians hated ISIS and helped liberation forces. Israel can only rely on electronic intelligence in Gaza. Hamas has an intelligence advantage on ground in Gaza, and Israel will bank on dynamic targeting, likely to cause huge loss of lives. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim to have fired missiles and drones targeting Israel. Houthis, who are sponsored by Iran, opens another complication in the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. The firing of the missiles further raises the risk of a regional conflict erupting. The Houthis had been suspected of an attack earlier this month targeting Israel by sending missiles and drones over the crucial shipping lane of the Red Sea, an assault that saw the US Navy shoot down the projectiles. Israel said its own fighter jets and its new Arrow missile defense system shot down 2 salvos of incoming fire hours apart as it approached the country's key Red Sea shipping port of Eilat. The Houthis, who have held Yemen's capitals since 2014 as part of that country's civil war, claimed 3 attacks on Israel in a latter military statement, without elaborating on the time frame of the operations and whether Tuesday's salvos represented 1 or 2 attacks. An Israeli airstrike has killed dozens of people at the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Gaza's health ministry has reported that the strike resulted in 50 deaths and 150 people injured. Israel has acknowledged the attack and stated that the target was a high-ranking Hamas commander whom they were able to eliminate. They claim to have neutralized a large number of terrorists from Hamas's central Jabalia battalion who were with the commander at the time. The bombing has sparked outrage in the Arab world, and several humanitarian organizations have also condemned the strikes on the refugee camp. Israel has entered the second phase of the war with the intention of eliminating Hamas. Israeli tanks and troops continue to advance towards northern Gaza. Gaza's health ministry reports that more than 8,500 people have been killed in the territory since the 7th of October. Gaza is also running dangerously low on supplies of food, water, fuel and medicine for its 2.2 million residents.
כוחותינו נלחמים כעת בעומק רצועת עזה. מחסלים מחבלים בהתקלויות מטווח קצר, תוקפים מטרות בתקיפות משולבות מהיבשה, מהאוויר ומהים. בשעות אחר הצהריים, כוחות חי"ר ושריון השתלטו על מעוז מרכזי של חמאס במערב העיר ג'באליה. מעוז זה שימש לאימונים לפעולת הטרור שאליה יצאו המחבלים לטבח, ומעבר למרחב החוף ממנו יצאו מחבלים נוספים לטבח ב-7 באוקטובר. במהלך הקרבות חוסלו מחבלים רבים והושמדו תשתיות טרור. זו לחימה מורכבת, חלקה היא גם פנים אל פנים. בקרבות איבדנו לוחמים. הלוחמים שלנו בשעה הזאת נלחמים בשדה הקרב. הם נלחמים באומץ ובגבורה. יש גם קרבות עזים שבהם מחסלים מחבלים, מנהלים קרבות פנים אל פנים וחותרים אל מגע. הלחימה הזאת היא גם לחימה מסוכנת, צריך להבין את זה. יש לזה מחירים, זה מורכב, אך היא הכרחית ביכולת שלנו להשיג את מטרות המלחמה. הבוקר, באילת, במרחב הדרומי, מערכות צה"ל זיהו מטרה אווירית שמתקרבת לכיוון שטח מדינת ישראל, הופעלו התראות, אין איום ולא נשקפת סכנה. אני חוזר, אין איום במרחב הזה ולא נשקפת סכנה. עד כה נמסרה הודעה למשפחותיהם של 240 חטופים. עד כה נמסרה הודעה למשפחותיהם של 315 חללי צה"ל. אנחנו מחבקים את המשפחות, חיבוק חם ודואגים ללוותן לאורך כל הדרך.
An Israeli attack on the densely populated Jabalia refugee camp, which is the largest refugee camp, in fact, in Gaza, has killed 50 and left as many as 150 people, 150 injured. Now, the Israeli military has claimed that the airstrikes that caused the explosions killed a Hamas commander, who was one of the main faces behind the October 7th deadly attack against southern Israel. At least one Palestinian was killed and 2 others were seriously injured as IDF conducted a drone strike against a target in Jenin, and clashes erupted between Israeli forces and Palestinians in the West Bank city. The Israeli forces reportedly surrounded the home of Jamal Havil, a member of the Fatah Revolutionary Council, during the raid. Havil has done a number of interviews with the regional media in recent days, slamming Israel over Gaza invasion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the hostage video released by terror group Hamas on the 30th of October. Netanyahu called the video as quote-unquote cruel psychological propaganda. Israel said its forces freed a soldier from Hamas captivity during the ground offensive in Gaza. Take a look at this report.
Israel's Prime Minister condemned a video that Hamas had released on Monday that shows 3 female hostages seized by the Islamist movement on October 7th. In the video, which is being watched on this phone, one of the hostages criticizes Benjamin Netanyahu for failing to protect Israeli citizens during the deadly attack and failing to get them back home. She purportedly calls for a deal to secure their release in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Netanyahu, in a statement, condemned the clip from Hamas as cruel propaganda. Israel's leader is coming under pressure over his handling of the crisis. Dozens of people attended a protest in Tel Aviv to call for the hostages' release. Shiri Grossbard is a close friend of one of the hostages, Yelena Tripanov.
I'm not a political person. I'm not the one with the answers, but I do know this. No other country in the world would have 239 of their people being kept hostage and not do anything about it. No politics, just bring them home now. 24 days is way too long for these people to be kept in captivity.
According to Israeli authorities, at least 239 hostages were taken captive by Hamas gunmen during the October 7th attack, which killed at least 1,400 people. The presence of the hostages in Gaza has complicated Israel forces' ground operation in the enclave, but Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire. Gaza health authorities say more than 8,300 people, many of them children, have been killed in Israeli attacks since Hamas' assault.
The ground action actually creates the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility of getting our hostages out, because Hamas will not do it unless they're under pressure. They simply will not do it.
On Monday, Israel said its forces had freed their first hostage during its Gaza ground offensive, a female soldier who Hamas captured in its October 7th raid. Israel's security agency released a photo of the soldier, Ori Megadish, surrounded by family members after her rescue. In her hometown of Kiryat Gat, residents cheered after news of her release. Since the October 7th attack, Hamas has released 4 hostages through back-channel efforts coordinated by Qatar.
Muslim and Arab American groups are pressurizing United States President Joe Biden to secure a Gaza ceasefire. The National Muslim Democratic Council, representing key states like Michigan, Ohio and Pennsylvania, demanded Biden broker a ceasefire, threatening to withhold support and votes in 2024 otherwise. That's when the United States goes to polls. Now, they criticize Biden's support for Israel during the conflict, urging him to end the violence. Biden met with Muslim leaders but faces growing discontent within Arab and Muslim American communities regarding his stance on Israel's actions in Gaza. Tensions rise in U.S. communities amid Israel-Hamas war. In the U.S., the conflict in Israel and Gaza has left Jewish and Palestinian American communities on edge. Experts are warning of a rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Demonstrations on both sides of the conflict have broken out across the country.
Nolan Drazin has never been this worried walking around campus at Georgetown University. Over the past couple of weeks, he's seen protests which launched into hateful tirades. He says he received threats of violence himself and that people tried to find his home address. We watch a video of a rally at the University of Pennsylvania where demonstrators can be heard calling for genocide against Jews.
It's extremely unsettling to see the calls for genocide, to see the calls for one state with no Jews in it, to see them walk right by and right in front of Jews on campus. It takes a toll, but you have to show up and you have to do what you have to do, otherwise they win.
What Nolan has done is co-found a group of Jewish law students who support Israel. The group wants to take a stand against what they describe as growing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric in the US.
This gentleman.
Fear is mounting among the Palestinian American community too. In Chicago, this little boy was killed in an alleged hate crime. Authorities said 6-year-old Wadia al-Fayumi was attacked for being Muslim and that tensions over the conflict in the Middle East led to the killing. Abir Ramadan Shinawi works as an educational consultant in the Palestinian American community. She would only talk to us in a park as she fears her office may become a target.
The 6-year-old boy who was murdered in the Chicago area from my hometown has caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear in parents who are making sure that their kids are being safe as well. My daughter, she texts me from work and she's like, "Mom, I feel anxious. I don't know why." And we talked about it and it was about everything that was going on. And she said she feels paranoid about going out.
Tensions in the US are so high that President Joe Biden has spoken out to address the issue.
We must, without equivocation, denounce anti-Semitism. We must also, without equivocation, denounce Islamophobia. And to all you hurting, those of you hurting, I want you to know I see you. You belong.
Amid growing divisions, there are instances of Jews and Arabs coming together. This rally was organized by Jewish Voice for Peace, a group that's critical of Israeli policy.
And I need to say something, I need to do something. We've been the victims of genocide before, and I can't sit by and watch my people now do that to others. So hoping to be here and hoping collectively we can send a powerful message.
As a Jew, it's important to me that my grief not be weaponized in this moment.
It's a beautiful thing that there are so many Jews, because I think it's a very appropriate representation of what it's like back home for people like us as well. It's not really about the religion at the end of the day. It's about humanity. It doesn't matter what you believe in. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter where you're from.
Anti-Semitic incidents have spiked worldwide following the Hamas attack on Israel. Verbal abuse, online threats and physical assaults against Jews rose significantly in the United States, UK, France, Germany and South Africa. Anti-Semitism seen growing following the Israel-Hamas war. Anger over Palestinian casualties in the conflict often leads to aggression against Jews, creating fears of random attacks and prompting increased security measures. There's an increase in abuse, online threats and physical assault of Jews. These incidents have in fact spiked worldwide following the Hamas attack on Israel. A public health catastrophe is imminent in Gaza, the World Health Organization said on Tuesday, amid overcrowding, mass displacement and damage to infrastructure in Gaza.
Surgeries cannot happen without anesthesia. In fact, they do happen without anesthesia. It's an imminent public health catastrophe that looms with the mass displacement, the overcrowding, the damage to water and sanitation infrastructure.
The numbers are appalling. Reportedly now more than 3,450 children have been killed. Staggeringly, this number rises significantly every single day. Gaza has become a graveyard for children. More than 1 million children of Gaza have a critical water crisis. Gaza's water production now, its capacity is at 5% of its daily output. So child deaths to dehydration, particularly infant deaths to dehydration, are a growing threat.
The latest number we have is that nearly 672,000 people are sheltering in 150 UNRWA facilities, mainly schools, but also other facilities. That means that the average number of internally displaced in these shelters, which are prepared to be built to also be shelters, is over 3 times their intended capacity. So they are wildly overcrowded.
In other updates coming in from the West Asia, the United States is sending an additional 300 troops to the Middle East following the continuous attacks against U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. According to the U.S. Defense Department, these troops have been sent with a focus on providing support in areas like explosive ordnance disposal and communications. Pentagon spokesperson have informed that this month there have been 27 attacks against U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. Listen in to know what he said.
Updates today, I can announce the decision to deploy an additional 300 troops to the U.S. Central Command region from home stations in the continental United States. These additional troops will provide capabilities in explosive ordnance disposal, communications, and other support enablers for forces already in the region. Please note that we will not discuss specific deployment locations for these forces, but I can confirm they are not going to Israel and that they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities. Again, we'll continue to keep you updated. What I'm tracking right now is since our self-defense strikes on 26 October, there have been 6 additional, what I would consider small-scale attacks, 3 in Iraq, 3 in Syria. Right now, we're tracking a total of 27 attacks, 16 in Iraq, 11 in Syria. Again, as we see the data miner alerts pop up, we check each of those with CENTCOM, go back to verify the information. And as that information is either verified or batted down, we'll make sure to let you know.
Moving on to some climate change stories now. A wildfire in Southern California driven by desert winds has scorched 2,200 acres, around 819 hectares, and led to evacuation order for 4,000 residents in Riverside Country. The Highland fire nearly doubled in size overnight, pushed westward by Santa Ana winds. Now, these winds occur seasonally when dry desert air moves towards the ocean, posing a fire threat in Southern California. The fire was unchecked as of Tuesday morning. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection stated with crews attacking the blaze on the ground and aircraft dropping, retardant. The Riverside County Fire Department ordered the evacuation of roughly 4,000 people, including the small towns as well, where the fire started on Monday. Wildfire continues to rage in Southern California. We also have several reactions coming in. Let's listen in.
Well, there was a lot of smoke in the sky, and there was some uncertainty initially about whether it would be a mandatory evacuation or not. And it was made mandatory with law enforcement cars coming around with red and blue flashing lights and broadcasting over a speaker that we should all leave. It's hard to deal and hard to know how severe the fire is when they're being evacuated, because they don't wait till it's severe. But then you're in all this severe traffic, and so you have to be on your toes, even if you're 85.
Well, it's real scary, especially when you leave all your medication and everything at home. You just
leave your home.
We were at home, but I got a little camper now that we're in, but very frightening. I have seen RVs burn. And one goes up, there's no stopping them. They get so hot they melt the frame.
Australia recorded its driest September on record, and this has accelerated an early start to fire season in Australia, where the Bureau Australia forecasts months of hot weather and below average rainfall in the coming months. Massive bushfires have engulfed southeast portion of Queensland, which has destroyed 45 homes and killed 2 people just last week. More than 7,500 hectares of area is burning and out of control in the neighbouring state of New South Wales, which is only about 40 kilometres from one of the Queensland fires. Switching our focus to some other international stories now. In other updates coming in from the United States, US President Joe Biden signed a new executive order at the White House that seeks to reduce the risks that artificial intelligence poses to Americans and national security. This move is the latest step by the Biden administration to set parameters around AI as it makes rapid gains in capability and popularity in an environment of so far limited regulation. Have a look at this report.
To realize the promise of AI and avoid the risk, we need to govern this technology.
U.S. President Joe Biden signed a new executive order at the White House on Monday that seeks to reduce the risks that artificial intelligence poses to Americans and national security. The order requires developers of AI systems to share the results of safety tests with the U.S. government before they are released to the public. It also directs agencies to set standards for that testing and address related chemical, biological, nuclear, and cybersecurity risks.
In the wrong hands, AI can make it easier for hackers to exploit vulnerabilities in the software that makes our society run.
The move is the latest step by the Biden administration to set parameters around AI as it makes rapid gains in capability and popularity in an environment of so far limited regulation. The new order goes beyond voluntary commitments made earlier this year by AI companies such as OpenAI, Google parent Alphabet, and Meta Platforms, which all pledged to label content that is AI generated.
It's already happening. AI devices are being used to deceive people. Deepfakes use AI generated audio and video to smear reputations. I've watched one of me on a couple of things. I said, when the hell did I say that?
Biden said his executive order will seek to address the risk of bias and civil rights violations that AI poses.
That means clear guidance for landlords and federal contractors and federal programs to prevent the bias in AI tools that can be used to make decisions on whether or not someone qualifies for housing or benefits or a job.
He also called on Congress to pass legislation to regulate AI, in particular on data privacy.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of the Bulletin. Thank you very much for joining me. It's a goodbye for now. You all have a great day ahead.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you, depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighters are not able to douse the fire is when it actually catches the nation's attention, the city's attention, or media attention.
The towering landfills worsen one of Delhi's biggest problems: pollution.